She froze. Right there, in the middle of the rooftop party, framed by string lights and coworkers holding cheap wine in plastic cups, she froze. Her fingers clutched the edge of her purse like it had bitten her. And for a few seconds, maybe longer, she just stared at it. Not at her phone, not at her lipstick, not at her compact mirror. At the ring. My ring. And the note folded beneath it. She didn't know I was watching. Of course she didn't. She thought I was at home, snoring on the couch with the dog, or microwaving another sad dinner for one. That's what I was supposed to be doing. That's what she told me to do. But there I was, 2 drinks in, tucked behind a crowd of finance bros talking about golf, watching my wife panic. You might be thinking this was revenge, that I caught her cheating and decided to go nuclear. It's not that simple. This wasn't revenge. This was confirmation. Because sometimes the silence in a relationship is louder than screaming. And for months, her silence had been suffocating. It started as an itch, a shift in her laugh, a different tone when she said my name. She used to say it softly, like it mattered. Then it became sharper, quicker, like it was just another syllable to get out of the way. I didn't confront her. I didn't snoop. I didn't scroll through her phone or follow her after work. No. Instead, I left her something small, something silent, a quiet grenade, tucked between her makeup bag and her wallet. I wanted to see her reaction when she found it, not hear her excuses, not read some guilt-drenched text. I wanted to see it, and I saw everything I needed. Her face drained of color, her body stiffened, and then, this is the part I'll never forget, she looked straight at one of her colleagues, a man I'd never seen before, and shook her head just once. He didn't ask a question. He didn't say a word. He just took a step back and turned away. They both knew. I didn't. Not yet. But that was the moment I realized. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't inventing stories in my head because I was insecure. Something was happening, and I had just pulled the pin. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even go home. I sat in my car just 2 blocks from the party, staring at the steering wheel like it might offer some kind of answer. Her reaction kept looping in my head. That sharp inhale. The look she gave that man, like a warning and a goodbye all in one. You know when someone communicates an entire sentence with a single glance? That was it. I saw it happen. I felt it like a punch to the ribs. And I didn't even know his name. The party broke up around midnight. People staggered out in pairs, laughing, carrying leftover cupcakes and cheap wine bottles like trophies. But not her. Not them. They left separately, intentionally, I think. He exited first, alone, hands shoved in his pockets. She came out 12 minutes later, scanning the street, tapping her phone, her movements erratic. Paranoid. I slid lower in my seat and killed the headlights. She didn't call a rideshare. She just walked. Fast. Like she didn't want to be followed. Like maybe she thought she was being followed. I didn't follow her. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too hard. Instead, I went to a late-night diner and sat there with a coffee I didn't drink and a slice of pie I didn't touch. I stared at my phone, at the lock screen, at our last selfie together, her smiling into the camera, me trying not to blink. It was taken 3 weeks ago. I looked like a man in love. She looked like she was already gone. When I got home the next morning, she was in the kitchen acting like nothing had happened, wearing a sweatshirt, humming while she poured cereal. Like the night before had been a dream. She even asked me how I slept. I said nothing, just watched her fingers. They trembled when she picked up her spoon. Not much, barely noticeable, but I saw it. And that's when it hit me. She hadn't told me she found the ring. No accusation, no questions, no confrontation. She was pretending it never happened, which meant one thing. She had something to hide. I spent the rest of the day in a fog. She left for errands. I stayed behind and stared at the spot where her purse usually sat. I wanted to check it. God, I wanted to tear it apart. But I didn't. I knew she'd already removed it, buried it, maybe thrown it in a trash can on the way home. But I had something she didn't know about. The note. I wrote 2 copies. And the second one? Well, I hadn't used it yet. I didn't expect her to break so easily. Not Marla. She was always the calm one. Composed. Strategic. She could smile her way through a funeral, cry on command, laugh in meetings where no one else got the joke. She knew how to hold the mask. So when she came home that evening after groceries with nothing in her hands but a bottle of wine and her keys clenched tight enough to leave marks, I knew she was unraveling, slowly, but surely. We barely spoke. She asked what I wanted for dinner. I said I wasn't hungry. She poured herself a glass, sat down on the couch, and watched a reality show she used to hate. She was trying to look casual, but her leg bounced the entire time. She never used to fidget. That was my thing. I waited. I didn't bring up the party, or the purse, or the note, but I started planning. I took the second note, the copy I'd written in the same shaky handwriting, with the same sentence, and I slipped it between the pages of a book she'd been reading. Some paperback novel with a shirtless man on the cover that she left on the nightstand. I tucked it right at the spot where the heroine finds out her husband is cheating. Call it poetic justice. Or maybe I was just being petty. Honestly, at that point, I didn't care. I just needed to see how deep the performance would go. 2 nights later, I got my answer. She was in bed, propped up against the pillows, pretending to read. I was sitting at the desk across the room, answering fake emails just to avoid looking at her. Then I heard it, the soft crinkle of paper. A pause. No gasp. No questions. Just silence. She didn't turn her head. Didn't move a muscle. Her eyes were on the page, but not reading. I turned slowly in my chair and watched her out of the corner of my eye. She folded the note back up, calmly closed the book, and placed it in the drawer of her nightstand without saying a word. That's when I realized something that made my stomach drop. She wasn't confused. She wasn't scared. She was hiding. Not just from me, but from herself. From the idea that I knew. From the version of herself she desperately needed me to still believe in. That second note. It wasn't a question anymore. It was a warning. She knew I was onto her. And now, the game had changed. She wasn't going to admit anything. Not yet. She was going to play the long game. Pretend. Smile. Sleep beside me like everything was fine. Because she thought she could outlast me. Outmaneuver me. But here's the thing Marla never understood. I don't want revenge. I want truth. And if she wouldn't give it to me willingly, I'd pull it out of her piece by piece, even if it destroyed us both in the process. 3 days after she found the second note, Marla did something I wasn't prepared for. She left her purse on the kitchen counter, unzipped. That might sound like nothing, but trust me, it wasn't. Marla never left anything out of place. She was obsessive about her things. Keys on the hook. Shoes aligned by the door. Purse zipped, always. It was her way of creating order, of staying in control. So to see it lying there like a forgotten grocery bag, flap open, wallet barely tucked inside, it screamed at me. She wanted me to look. But not because she was careless. No, because she wanted to know if I would. It was bait. A test. And I failed it. I waited until I heard the shower running upstairs, then slowly walked over. My hands were sweating. I wasn't sure what I even expected to find. Maybe a receipt. A second phone. Something. Anything. But there was nothing unusual. Lipstick. Wallet. Hair tie. Mints. A folded grocery list. I stood there frozen, heart pounding, eyes scanning every crevice like a detective who didn't have a warrant. And then I noticed what wasn't there. The note. The original one. I had no idea what she did with it. Maybe she burned it. Maybe she flushed it. Maybe it was in that other man's drawer right now. His little souvenir. But it was gone. And so was the ring. I never told her I saw her reaction at the party, but I didn't need to anymore. She was already scrambling to erase it. To pretend it had never happened. And that terrified me. Because if she was that desperate to erase a clue, then there had to be something much darker beneath it. Something I hadn't touched yet. A line I hadn't crossed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed beside her, listening to the shallow rhythm of her breathing, trying to remember the last time it felt comforting. I reached out once, instinctively, to brush her hair off her face, and she flinched. Not dramatically, just a tiny twitch of her shoulder, like her muscles forgot she was supposed to be pretending everything was normal. So I started talking. Quietly. Casually. I asked about Trevor, the coworker who threw the party. She said it was a great night, but too many people and too much cheap wine. I asked if anyone brought dates. She said she couldn't remember. I asked if anything weird happened. And then, she laughed. It was soft and practiced and completely hollow. You're acting like I had a secret affair on a rooftop or something. She said it as a joke. But her eyes didn't move. They stayed fixed on the ceiling like she was reading a script. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because that laugh was guilt, dressed in humor. That laugh was her last defense. And I knew, right then and there, that I was done playing nice. If she wanted to keep hiding her truth, I'd make it impossible to keep it buried. And the next move? It would be mine. The next few days felt like I was living inside a glass house that she kept repainting. Everything on the surface looked polished. Meals were cooked, smiles rehearsed, kisses light and mechanical. But underneath, every corner of our life felt fragile, ready to crack with one misplaced word. Marla had entered full performance mode, and I couldn't decide if I admired her dedication or if it made me sick. That's when I realized something about myself, something I wasn't proud of. I didn't want her to confess anymore. I wanted her to slip. Not willingly. Not through guilt or tears or some emotional apology. No, I wanted her to mess up. To get caught. To be exposed without control over the narrative. I wanted the moment she feared the most. And then, by sheer accident, it happened. It was late, somewhere between insomnia and dawn. I was downstairs in the kitchen, scrolling through old playlists trying to fill the silence, when I heard her phone buzz upstairs. Normally she slept like a rock. That night, for some reason, she left her phone in the living room charging. Maybe she forgot. Maybe it was bait again. But I didn't care anymore. I picked it up and glanced at the screen. One new notification. Not a name, just a number. And a voicemail. I shouldn't have opened it. I know that. I can already hear people in the comments saying I crossed a line. But you know what? That line had been smudged out the moment she opened that purse and looked another man in the eye. So I tapped play. The voice that came through wasn't hers. It wasn't mine. It wasn't Trevor's. It was low, calm, male. And it said exactly this. Look, I don't know what your plan is with your husband, but I'm not doing this in secret anymore. Either you tell him, or I'm out. I'm not going to keep being your escape. That was it. 18 seconds. No name. No context. No proof of anything beyond tone and implication. But it was enough. More than enough. I stood there gripping her phone so tightly I could hear the plastic groan. I didn't feel anger, at least not at first. It was something deeper. Something colder. Not a burning rage, but a kind of numb, hollow collapse. Like a floor giving out under your feet and realizing you were never standing on solid ground to begin with. She had someone else. And not just some fling. Someone who thought he mattered. Someone who was done being a secret. I placed the phone exactly where it had been. I didn't delete the message. I didn't confront her. Instead, I waited until she got up that morning, saw the voicemail alert, and did the worst possible thing she could have done. She deleted it. Right in front of me. No hesitation. No curiosity. Just swipe and gone. As if she already knew what it said. I didn't say a word. Just watched her sip her coffee and smile at me with that same brittle warmth. But in my head, something had changed. I was no longer looking for answers. I was preparing for extraction. They say when someone lies long enough, they forget which version of the story they're telling. That's what I was counting on. I wasn't just waiting for Marla to break. I was building the moment that would make her shatter. By this point, I had no illusions left. I wasn't chasing reconciliation. I wasn't hoping for closure. I wasn't even angry in the usual sense. What I felt was clinical. I was documenting her erosion. Every dodge. Every deleted voicemail. Every twitch in her jaw when I asked something benign like, "Did Trevor say anything funny at the party?" That one question nearly made her drop her glass. She didn't know that I'd started preparing my exit. Slowly, quietly, I moved money out of our joint account, backed up every document, every text, every image of us into a private folder. I found a storage unit 2 towns over and began boxing up the things I cared about, one item at a time, hidden inside gym bags and grocery totes. But it wasn't enough for me to leave. That would have been too simple, too clean. She needed to feel what it was like to lose control. Just once. So I disappeared. Not forever. Just for 30 hours. I left my phone on the bedside table. Car in the driveway. Wallet in the drawer. I took a prepaid burner, packed a small duffel, and drove 3 hours out to a roadside motel no one with self-respect would stay in. Curtains stained. Bed too small. No windows that locked properly. It was perfect. And then I waited. I didn't text. I didn't call. I didn't leave a note. I wanted to see what she'd do when I vanished, not as a punishment, but as a mirror. How would she explain it to herself? How would she explain it to him? Would she panic? Would she call the police? Would she confess? I watched from the burner phone, logged into our home Wi-Fi camera. She didn't even know I had installed one last month when she was at the salon. The feed was choppy, but good enough to see what mattered. The first 6 hours? Nothing. She didn't notice. She thought I was sulking in the office again. But by evening, she started pacing, calling my name, peeking out the window, calling a few numbers, none of which I recognized. Her hands were shaking. But then came the part one didn't expect. At 2:13 a.m., she opened the cabinet under the sink and pulled out a shoebox I hadn't seen in years. One we used to keep letters in, old photos, receipts from vacations. She took something out, held it, and sat on the kitchen floor. She stayed there until sunrise. When I got back the next morning, calm, collected, shirt slightly wrinkled like I'd just stepped out for air, she was still awake. Her eyes were glassy. Her voice was small. "Where were you?" I shrugged. "Just needed space." She stared at me like she wanted to scream. But she didn't. Instead, she nodded slowly and said, "Okay." And in that moment, I realized she wasn't just hiding something anymore. She was terrified I had found out what it was, which meant the end was closer than I thought. She kept looking at me like I was someone who'd come back from the dead. I hadn't expected her to fall apart, but I could see the cracks webbing through her composure. She hovered near me like I might vanish again if she blinked too long. Made breakfast I didn't ask for. Asked if I needed anything. Laughed too loud at things that weren't funny. Marla, who once rolled her eyes at affection in public, suddenly couldn't stop touching my arm. Her mask had changed, from secrecy to desperation. But I wasn't playing anymore. I wanted the end. And endings, I've learned, don't come from shouting. They don't come from ultimatums or slammed doors. They come from quiet words, spoken slowly, at the precise moment someone thinks they're safe again. So I waited. I waited through one more week of forced smiles and half-slept nights. I let her believe the balance had returned. That the ring, the note, the voicemail, the silence, all of it was swept under the rug. She was starting to breathe again. I could see it in the way she moved. A little looser. A little less guarded. She thought I was done asking questions. But I wasn't interested in questions anymore. Only answers. It happened on a Thursday. Rain was tapping at the windows, and she was making tea, humming to herself, some off-key tune I didn't recognize. I sat at the dining table and folded my hands. Calm. Still. I didn't look at her when I spoke. "Who's Evan?" The cup stopped halfway to her mouth. It didn't shatter. She didn't drop it. She just froze, so absolutely still it felt like the room itself held its breath. She didn't respond. Not right away. So I said it again. Slower. "Who is Evan?" Her face turned a color I'd never seen before. Not pale. Not flushed. Just blank. Like every drop of expression had been drained out of her. She placed the cup down gently, without a sound, and turned to face me. And then, just like that, she lied. "He's just a client. From the firm. I told you about him, remember? The divorce case." Her voice didn't shake. Her lips didn't tremble. But I saw it in her eyes. The flicker of panic. The instant recalibration of a story she hadn't rehearsed in months. So I leaned forward, keeping my voice even. "You didn't tell me he left you a voicemail saying he was done being your escape." That was it. That was the cut. Her jaw twitched. She blinked. And for the first time in this entire warped, twisted game, Marla said nothing. She didn't defend. Didn't deny. Didn't ask how I knew. She just stood there, fingers curling slowly at her sides, and whispered one word that made me feel more hollow than any truth ever could. "Please." That's when I knew. It was real. This wasn't some office crush. Some fantasy flirty text. She had carved out a secret life and parked her guilt in another man's bed. And now, finally cornered, she had no story left to tell. No timeline to invent. Just one pathetic, broken plea. But here's the thing. When someone says, "please," it's never really about you. It's about saving themselves. So I stood up, walked past her, and whispered back, "You should have told me his name the moment you looked at him instead of me." Then I left. Not the house. Not yet. Just the room. Because endings don't always explode. Sometimes they settle like dust. And wait. She didn't come after me that night. I think she knew there was nothing left to chase. I slept in the guest room. Door locked. Light off. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just lay there with my eyes open, watching the ceiling slowly turn blue with morning light. It was the most peaceful I had felt in months. Not because it didn't hurt. It did, in ways I can't even describe. But because, finally, the pretending was over. When I came downstairs the next day, she was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with both hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not in size, but in presence. Like someone had taken out the wires holding her up. There were no grand speeches. No outbursts. Just silence between us, The kind that doesn't beg to be filled. She slid something across the table. My ring. No words. No apology. No explanation. But it was enough. I took a breath, picked it up, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel anger. I felt relief. We talked for 2 hours. Quietly. Calmly. She admitted it. Evan was someone she met at a conference 8 months ago. It started as harmless conversation, turned into drinks, turned into venting about our marriage, turned into something she swore she didn't plan. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want the play-by-play. I just wanted honesty. And that morning, for the first time in what felt like forever, I got it. She cried. Not for me. For herself. For the life she sabotaged. And I let her. Because I'd already done my grieving. Alone. In silence. Night after night. Wondering why the woman I loved was slipping through my fingers without a sound. When it was done, I stood up, put the ring on the table, and said, I'm not staying because I need you. I'm staying because I want to try, one last time, if you do too. But if there's any part of you that's still with him, even in your head, tell me now. Because I deserve to be the only ghost in this house. She nodded. And for once, I believed her. It wasn't easy after that. We went to counseling. We fought. We unpacked years of things we didn't even realize we'd buried. And yes, I still have days where I wonder if I made the right choice. But 6 months later, something changed. We were walking home from a movie. Nothing special, just a quiet Thursday night. She reached for my hand, squeezed it once, and said, Thank you for staying when I wouldn't have blamed you for walking. I didn't say anything back. I just smiled and kept walking. Because the truth is, I stayed not for her. I stayed for me. To rebuild something. Not what we had before, but something new, something honest, something scarred but real. Sometimes, the ending you imagine isn't the one you get. Sometimes, it's better.